Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's story. Your likes and subscriptions can give me hope to create better stories, and let me know what changes you'd like me to make to my voice. Alright, now let's get to tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Evening Departure. The sun hung low in the western sky like a golden coin suspended in honey, casting long shadows across the calm waters of the fjord. Olaf Gentleheart stood at the edge of the wooden dock, his weathered hands resting on the smooth gunwale of his beloved boat, Stjendens, the Star Dancer. At 63 winters old, his beard had turned the colour of fresh snow, and his eyes held the deep blue of countless peaceful seas. Unlike the fierce dragon ships that once carried warriors to distant shores, Stjendens was built for solitude and contemplation. Her hull curved gracefully like a crescent moon, painted in soft blues and whites that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. The single square sail hung loose against the mast, decorated with silver stars that caught and reflected the evening glow. Olaf had spent many seasons preparing for this journey. Not a voyage of conquest or trade, but a pilgrimage of the soul, a gentle passage north to witness the great lights that danced across the winter sky. The aurora borealis, the northern lights, had called to him in his dreams for months now, whispering promises of peace and wonder. The old Viking breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the clean, salt-tinged air. The scent of pine from the distant forests mingled with the fresh smell of the sea, creating a fragrance that spoke of home and adventure in equal measure. Seabirds called softly overhead, their cries like gentle lullabies carried on the evening breeze. As twilight settled over the water, Olaf made his final preparations. His provisions were simple but sufficient. Dried fish wrapped in soft cloth, wheels of aged cheese, fresh water in wooden casks, and warm furs for the cold nights ahead. He had no need for weapons or armour on this journey. His only companions would be the stars, the sea, and his own peaceful thoughts. The dock creaked gently beneath his feet as he stepped aboard Stjernedans. The boat welcomed him with a familiar rocking motion, like a mother gently swaying a child to sleep. Olaf had built this vessel with his own hands during the long winter months, crafting each plank with love and patience. Every joint was perfectly fitted, every rope carefully woven. She was more than a boat. She was a floating meditation, a wooden prayer upon the water. With practiced movements, Olaf untied the mooring lines and pushed away from the dock. The boat drifted slowly into the fjord, caught by the gentle current that would carry him toward the open sea. He did not hurry to raise the sail. Instead, he sat quietly in the stern, one hand resting on the smooth wooden tiller, and simply listened to the sounds of evening settling over the water. The soft lapping of waves against the hull created a rhythm as old as time itself. Splash, pause. Splash, pause. Like a as Stiena dance glided further from shore, Olaf could see the lights beginning to twinkle in the windows of his village. Smoke rose from chimneys in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of burning wood and the promise of warm hearths. Children would be gathering around their elders now, listening to stories of brave deeds and magical creatures. But Olaf's story was just beginning, written in starlight and sea foam. The first stars appeared as tiny pinpricks of light in the deepening sky. Olaf knew each constellation like old friends. The Great Bear, the Swan, the Dragon that wound its way across the northern heavens. These stellar companions had guided his people for countless generations, their positions as reliable as the sunrise and as comforting as a mother's song. When the evening breeze finally stirred, Olaf stood and raised the sail with smooth, unhurried movements. The fabric caught the wind with a gentle whoosh, and Stjerndans began to move with more purpose through the water. But even now, her pace remained peaceful and measured. This was not a race against time, but a dance with eternity. The old Viking settled back into his favourite spot near the stern, where he could feel every subtle movement of his boat through the water. The tiller fit perfectly in his palm, worn smooth by years of faithful service. He made small adjustments to their course, reading the wind and waves like a beloved book he had studied all his life. As full darkness embraced the fjord, the water transformed into a mirror of liquid obsidian, reflecting the stars so perfectly that Olaf felt as though he was sailing through the heavens themselves. The boundary between sea and sky dissolved, leaving him floating in an infinite cosmos of gentle light and peaceful darkness. The sound of the water flowing along the hull was hypnotic, a continuous, soothing whisper that spoke of ancient mysteries and timeless journeys. Occasionally, a night bird would call from the distant shore, its voice echoing across the water like a blessing. The wind sang a soft lullaby through the rigging, and the sail fluttered gently in the breeze like the wings of a sleeping swan. Olaf pulled a thick fur cloak around his shoulders and settled deeper into his comfortable position. The rhythmic motion of the boat was already working its magic, easing the tensions from his muscles and quieting the constant chatter of his mind. Each gentle rise and fall of the hull carried away another worry, another concern of the everyday world he had left behind. The old Viking had learned long ago that the sea was the greatest teacher of patience and presence. On land, It was easy to rush from one task to another, always planning, always worrying about tomorrow. But here, surrounded by the vast expanse of water and sky, time moved differently. Each moment stretched like honey, sweet and golden and complete in itself. As Stjernedans reached the mouth of the fjord and entered the open sea, Olaf felt the familiar thrill of freedom that came with leaving the confines of the shore. The waves grew slightly larger here, but they remained gentle and rhythmic, like the breathing of a sleeping giant. The boat rode over each swell with grace, her bow cutting through the water with barely a sound. The salt spray that occasionally touched his face was cool and refreshing, carrying with it the essence of countless miles of open ocean. Olaf tasted the minerals and life of the sea on his lips, a flavour that spoke of depth and mystery and endless possibility. This was the taste of adventure, but not the harsh, violent adventure of his youth. This was the gentle adventure of the soul, seeking not conquest, but understanding. Hours passed, like minutes, as Olaf sailed steadily northward. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, marking the passage of time in their ancient, stately dance. He navigated by their light, following courses that his ancestors had sailed for generations. The North Star hung like a faithful beacon ahead of him, steady and true, pointing the way toward his destination. The old Viking found his thoughts drifting like clouds across a summer sky. He remembered his childhood, playing by the shore while his father worked on the family fishing boat. He thought of his late wife, Astrid, whose gentle voice had been like music across the water. He recalled peaceful evenings spent with friends around the fire, sharing stories and watching the flames dance in the darkness. But these memories brought no sadness, only a warm contentment that settled in his chest like glowing embers. The gentle motion of the boat seemed to rock away any grief or regret, leaving only gratitude for the rich tapestry of his life. Each wave that passed beneath the hull carried him not just toward his destination, but deeper into a state of profound peace. The night air grew cooler as Stjernedans sailed further north, but Olaf was comfortable in his warm furs. The cold was clean and invigorating, sharpening his senses alone on this vast expanse of water. The sea was full of life, from the tiniest plankton to the great whales, all part of an intricate web of existence that stretched from the surface to the deepest trenches. The boat's gentle rocking had become as natural as breathing now. Olaf's body swayed with each movement, completely in harmony with the rhythm of the sea. His eyes grew heavy as he watched the stars reflect on the water, creating pathways of light that seemed to lead directly to the realm of dreams. As the first chapter of his journey drew to a close, Olaf felt a deep sense of contentment settling over him like a warm blanket. The busy world of the village was now just a memory, fading like the last glow of sunset on the horizon. Ahead lay only the peaceful darkness of the northern sea, the faithful guidance of the stars, and the promise of wonders yet to come. The old Viking adjusted his course slightly, following the ancient routes that generations of his people had travelled before him. The boat responded to his touch like a living thing, eager to carry him toward whatever mysteries awaited in the aurora-painted skies of the far north. With each gentle wave that passed beneath the hull, Olaf felt himself sinking deeper into the meditative trance that the sea so generously offered to those who approached her with respect and patience. Stjörnadans sailed on through the star-filled night, her passage marked only by the soft sound of water flowing along her sides and the gentle creaking of her rigging in the breeze. Behind them, the last lights of civilization disappeared below the horizon. Ahead lay only the infinite expanse of the Northern Sea, patient and eternal, ready to share her secrets with the peaceful Viking who had come seeking not gold or glory, but the simple wonder. And still the boat rocked gently forward, carrying Olaf deeper into the night and deeper into the profound peace that only comes to those who surrender themselves completely to the ancient rhythms of the sea. Chapter 2: The Deep Blue Hours. Dawn arrived like a whispered secret, painting the eastern sky in shades of pearl and rose. Olaf had dozed fitfully through the night, never fully asleep, but never entirely awake. Floating in that peaceful space between dreams and consciousness that sailors know so well, the gentle motion of Stjörnadans had cradled him like a rocking chair, and he felt more rested than he had in months. The old Viking opened his eyes to find himself surrounded by a world transformed. Gone were the familiar shores and distant mountains of home. In every direction stretched an endless expanse of deep blue water, so vast and perfect that it seemed like sailing across the very dome of the sky itself. The sea had taken on that particular quality of northern waters, clear and pure, with depths that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Small wavelets lapped gently against the hull of his boat, each one catching and reflecting the soft morning light like tiny mirrors. The sound was different now from the night before, less mysterious, more playful. It was as if the sea had awakened refreshed and was greeting the new day with quiet joy. Splash whisper, splash whisper. The rhythm continued endlessly, a liquid mantra that seemed to slow Olaf's heartbeat to match its peaceful cadence. Olaf stretched slowly, feeling the pleasant stiffness that came from a night spent outdoors. His bones were old, but they were strong bones, weathered by decades of honest work and clean living. The cold morning air filled his lungs as he breathed deeply, tasting the increasing saltiness that told him he was now truly in the open ocean, far from any land. He stood carefully in the gently swaying boat and looked around at his watery kingdom. The horizon curved away in all directions, a perfect circle with Stjärnadan at its centre. It was like being inside a vast blue dome, with the darker blue of the sea below and the lighter blue of the morning sky above. Wisps of white clouds drifted overhead like lazy sheep wandering across a celestial meadow. The sail hung slack in the still air, so Olaf lowered it completely and took up the long oars that lay along the sides of the boat. He had no particular hurry, no schedule to keep. The northern lights would wait for him, as they had waited for countless generations of travellers before him. For now, it was enough to simply be here, alone with the sea and the sky, and his own peaceful thoughts. The oars cut into the water with barely a sound, propelling Stjernedan forward at a gentle, measured pace. Each stroke was like a meditation. The quiet splash as the blade entered the water, the smooth resistance as it pulled through the liquid, the soft drip as it lifted clear for the next stroke. Olaf's muscles remembered this rhythm from his youth, when he had rowed his father's fishing boat through these same waters. But this was different from those working days of long ago. Then he had rowed with purpose and urgency, racing to reach the fishing grounds or hurrying home before a storm. Now, each stroke was an offering to the morning, a gentle prayer spoken with wood and water instead of words. There was no destination except the journey itself, no goal except the quiet joy of being alive and moving across the face of the deep. As the sun climbed higher, the water around the boat began to reveal its secrets. Schools of small silver fish swam just beneath the surface, their scales flashing like scattered coins in the sunlight. Occasionally, one would break the surface in a tiny leap, sending ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. Olaf watched these displays with the wonder of a child, marveling at the abundance of life that surrounded him. A curious seal appeared off the starboard side, its whiskered face popping up to study the strange intruder in its domain. The creature's dark eyes were intelligent and calm, showing no fear of the peaceful old man in his small boat. For several minutes, the seal kept pace with Stjernedan's, occasionally diving beneath the surface, only to reappear a few yards away, as if playing a gentle game of hide and seek. Olaf spoke softly to his marine companion. The encounter filled Olaf with a warm contentment. He had always felt a special kinship with the sea animals, seeing in them a wisdom and peace that humans often forgot in their busy lives. The seal's visit felt like a blessing, a sign that he was welcome in this vast blue wilderness. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed higher and the air grew warmer. Olaf removed his heavy cloak and rolled up the sleeves of his wool shirt, enjoying the feeling of the gentle breeze on his skin. The light wind that had begun to stir was coming from the southwest, perfect for his northward journey. He shipped the oars and raised the sail once more, adjusting it to catch the soft air. Stjernedans began to move with renewed purpose, her bow cutting through the small waves, with a quiet, hissing sound. The sail filled and emptied gently as the wind shifted, creating a rhythm as soothing as a lullaby. Olaf settled back into his favourite spot at the stern, one hand on the tiller, and let himself sink into the hypnotic pleasure of sailing. The boat seemed to know where she was going, requiring only the smallest adjustments to stay on course. Olaf had built her well, with a deep keel and balanced lines that made her stable and responsive, even in inexperienced hands. But these were not inexperienced hands. They were the hands of a man who had been reading wind and water since he was old enough to hold a rope. Time moved differently out here on the deep water. Without the landmarks and schedules of shore life, Olaf found himself falling into the ancient rhythm of the sea, sleeping when tired, eating when hungry, moving when the wind allowed, resting when it stilled. This was how his ancestors had lived, following the natural patterns of the world instead of fighting against them. He pulled out a piece of dried fish from his provisions and chewed it slowly, savouring the rich, smoky flavour. The fish had been caught in these very waters just weeks ago, and eating it felt like a communion with the sea itself. He followed it with a drink of fresh water from one of his wooden casks, the liquid cool and sweet after the salty air. The sun reached its zenith, hanging like a brilliant coin in the blue dome of the sky. Its light turned the water into a field of dancing diamonds, each wave crest catching and scattering the brightness in a million different directions. Olaf squinted against the glare, then found his wide-brimmed leather hat and pulled it down to shade his eyes. In the afternoon, the wind picked up slightly, and Stjernadans began to move with more enthusiasm through the water. The sound of her passage changed, becoming more musical, a liquid song of movement and freedom. The old Viking felt his spirits lift with the increasing breeze, and he found himself humming an ancient sailing song that his father had taught him decades ago. The melody seemed to merge with the sounds of wind and water, creating a symphony of pure contentment. Other boats had passed this way before, Olaf knew, carrying Vikings on journeys of trade and exploration and war. But how many had come simply for the joy of it, simply to experience the profound peace that only the sea could provide? A flock of seabirds appeared on the horizon, wheeling and diving as they fed on a school of fish. Their cries carried across the water, wild and free, speaking of winds and storms and distant shores. Some of them broke away from the main group and came to investigate Stjernadans, circling overhead with curious eyes before returning to their feast. Olaf watched them with pleasure, remembering how he had always envied birds their ability to soar above the water. But now in his small boat, he felt that he had found his own way to fly. Stjernadans was his wings, carrying him across the face of the deep with a brace that rivaled any creature of the air. The afternoon wore on in perfect contentment. The gentle wind held steady, pushing the boat northward at a comfortable pace. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of blue and gold. Olaf felt no urgency, no desire to be anywhere other than exactly where he was, alone on the vast sea, surrounded by beauty and peace. As evening approached, he began to think about the night ahead. He was now far enough north that the sun would set later and rise earlier, giving him longer hours of the magical twilight that made the northern waters so special. Soon, if the weather held clear, he might catch his first glimpse of the aurora, those mysterious lights that had drawn him on this journey. But even if the lights did not appear tonight, Olaf was content. The journey itself was the destination, each moment on the water a gift to be treasured. The gentle rocking of the boat, the sound of wind in the rigging, the endless blue expanse stretching to every horizon. These were riches beyond the dreams of kings. He adjusted the sail slightly as the wind shifted, then settled back to watch the sun begin its stately descent toward the sea. The water had taken on a deeper blue now, almost purple in the gathering dusk. Soon the stars would begin to appear, and another night of peaceful sailing would begin. Stjärnedan sailed on through the afternoon light, her passage marked only by the gentle wake that spread behind her and quickly disappeared. The boat and her solitary sailor had become part of the sea now, moving in perfect harmony with the ancient rhythms of wind and wave. There was no hurry, no anxiety, only the profound peace that comes to those who trust themselves completely to the wisdom of the waters. Somewhere ahead, beyond the curve of the horizon, the northern lights waited in their celestial dance. But they would keep until Olaf arrived, patient as the stars themselves. For now, it was enough to sail through this perfect afternoon, cradled by the sea and blessed by the endless sky, moving ever northward toward whatever wonders awaited in the aurora-painted darkness. The old Viking smiled to himself as he felt the familiar drowsiness that came with hours of peaceful sailing. His eyes grew heavy as he watched the play of light on the water, and he let himself drift into that blissful state between waking and sleeping, where sailors find their deepest rest. The boat would watch over him, faithful as an old friend, carrying him safely through the blue hours toward the magic of the northern night. Chapter 3. The Star-Kissed Waters. Evening came like a gentle blessing, painting the sky in shades of lavender and gold. The sun hung low on the western horizon, its light stretching across the water in a path of molten copper that seemed to lead directly to Stjärnedans. Olaf sat quietly in his boat, watching the daily miracle of sunset unfold across the vast canvas of sea and sky, feeling more at peace than he had in years. The wind, as the sun sank lower, the water around Stjärnedans began to transform. What had been deep blue during the day now turned to shades of violet and indigo, with streaks of gold and silver where the dying light caught the wave crests. It was as if the sea had put on her evening dress, adorning herself with colours too beautiful for any earthly jeweller to match. Fish began to rise to feed in the cooling water, air splashes creating rings of ripples that caught and scattered the last rays of sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, a whale spouted, its breath visible as a tall column of mist against the darkening sky. The sound of its exhalation carried across the water, a deep, satisfied sigh that spoke of contentment and peace. Olaf felt his own breathing, slow to match the easy rhythm of the sea. Each wave that passed beneath the hull seemed to carry away another tension from his body, another worry from his mind. The gentle motion of the boat was working its ancient magic, lulling him into that state of profound relaxation that only comes to those who surrender themselves completely to the wisdom of the waters. The first stars began to appear as pinpricks of light in the deepening sky. Olaf knew them all by name. Polaris, the faithful North Star that had guided his people for countless generations. The Great Bear, whose tail pointed the way through the darkness. The Swan, flying eternally across the celestial dome. These stellar companions had watched over Viking sailors for more than 1,000 years, and their presence filled him with a sense of continuity and belonging. As full darkness settled over the water, the stars emerged in all their glory. Here, far from the lights of any village or town, they shone with a brilliance that took Olaf's breath away. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, so bright and clear that he could see its spiral structure with his naked eyes. It was as if a cosmic aurora had been frozen in place, waiting for its earthly cousin to begin the nightly dance. The sea had become a perfect mirror, reflecting the stars so clearly that Olaf felt as though he was sailing through space itself. The boundary between water and sky had dissolved completely, leaving him floating in an infinite cosmos of gentle light and peaceful darkness. Occasionally, a night bird would call from somewhere in the vastness, or a fish would jump, breaking the mirror surface and sending ripples of starlight spreading outward. Diernadance sailed on through this celestial seascape, her passage almost silent except for the soft whisper of water along her hull and the gentle creaking of her rigging. The boat seemed to know that she was carrying her master through a cathedral of stars, and she moved with special grace and reverence. Every line of her hull, every curve of her bow had been shaped by Olaf's hands with love and patience, and now she was repaying that care with the gift of perfect sailing. The old Viking adjusted his thick fur cloak around his shoulders and settled deeper into his comfortable spot at the stern. The night air was growing cooler as they sailed steadily northward, but he was warm and content in his cocoon of wool and fur. The tiller fit perfectly in his palm. Worn smooth, time seemed to slow and stretch like honey in the stellar darkness. Minutes felt like hours, and hours passed like minutes. Olaf found his thoughts drifting like clouds across a summer sky, carried along by the gentle rhythm of the waves. He remembered his childhood, playing by the shore while his father worked on the family fishing boat. He thought of his late wife, Astrid, whose voice had been like music across the water. He recalled peaceful evenings spent with friends around the fire, sharing stories and watching the flames dance in the darkness. But these memories brought no sadness, only a warm contentment that settled in his chest like glowing embers. The motion of the boat seemed to rock away any grief or regret, leaving only gratitude for the rich tapestry of his life. Each wave that passed beneath the hull carried him not just toward his destination, but deeper into a state of profound peace that he had never experienced on land. Somewhere around midnight, Olaf noticed a change in the northern sky. At first, it was just a subtle brightening, a green tinge to the darkness that might have been imagination. But as he watched, the glow intensified, taking on the unmistakable shimmer of the aurora borealis. His heart quickened with anticipation as he realized that the northern lights were beginning their nightly dance. The aurora started as a faint arc of green light stretching across the northern horizon, but within minutes it began to pulse and flicker, growing brighter and more active. Ribbons of emerald fire started to wave and dance across the sky, as if invisible hands were shaking out vast curtains of light in the cosmic darkness. Olaf watched in wonder as the display intensified. The green ribbons were joined by streamers of blue and purple, all dancing together in a celestial ballet that took his breath away. The lights seemed to descend from the very dome of the sky, reaching down toward the sea with fingers of pure radiance. It was as if the stars themselves had come alive and were celebrating some cosmic festival of joy. The aurora's reflection in the still water created a double image of the light show, so that Stjerndans seemed to be sailing through a tunnel of dancing fire. Above and below, the lights pulsed and swayed in perfect harmony, creating a world of such beauty that Olaf felt tears of gratitude spring to his eyes. This was what he had come so far to see. This marriage of earth and sky, this dance of light and water that spoke of mysteries beyond human understanding. The boat continued its steady progress through the star-kissed waters, carrying its awe-struck passenger deeper into the realm of the northern lights. The aurora seemed to respond to their presence, growing brighter and more active as they sailed northward. Streamers of light began to arc directly overhead, creating a canopy of green and blue fire that made Olaf feel as though he was sailing through the very heart of heaven itself. He had heard many explanations for the northern lights, ancient stories of warriors dancing in Valhalla, scientific theories about particles from the sun interacting with the upper atmosphere. But here, alone on the dark sea with the aurora painting the sky in impossible colours, all explanations seemed inadequate. This was simply magic, pure and beautiful, a reminder that the world still held wonders beyond human comprehension. The display continued for hours, sometimes fading to a gentle glow on the horizon, sometimes exploding into brilliant curtains of light that stretched from one side of the sky to the other. Olaf sat transfixed, hardly daring to breathe for fear of disturbing the cosmic performance. The gentle rocking of the boat and the hypnotic dance of the lights combined to induce a state of deep meditation, a peace so profound that it seemed to touch his very soul. As the night wore on, the aurora began to pulse with a slower, more rhythmic pattern. The wild dance of the early hours gave way to a gentler swaying, like the breathing of some vast celestial creature. The lights seemed to be settling into sleep themselves, their intensity gradually dimming as dawn approached somewhere beyond the curve of the earth. Stjernadans sailed on through the pre-dawn darkness, her wake leaving a path of disturbed starlight on the mirror-smooth water. The wind had dropped to almost nothing, but the boat carried enough momentum to continue her northward progress at a peaceful pace. Olaf felt no need to adjust the sail or change course. The sea and sky seemed to be guiding him now, carrying him toward whatever destination awaited beyond the horizon. The old Viking pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders and allowed his eyes to drift closed for a few moments. The image of the dancing lights was burned into his memory, a vision of beauty that would stay with him for the rest of his days. But even with his eyes closed, he could still sense the aurora's presence, feel its gentle radiance painting the inside of his eyelids with ghost images of green and blue fire. When he opened his eyes again, the lights had faded to a soft glow on the northern horizon. But their magic lingered in the air like a blessing, transforming the ordinary darkness into something sacred and special. The stars seemed brighter now, as if they too had been energized by the aurora's dance. The water whispered secrets to the hull of the boat, and the wind sang lullabies in the rigging. Olaf felt a deep sense of completion settling over him like a warm blanket. He had come seeking the northern lights, and they had exceeded his wildest dreams. But more than that, he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. A peace so profound and complete that it seemed to heal wounds in his soul he hadn't realized were there. The boat rocked gently onward through the star-kissed waters, carrying her peaceful passenger toward whatever new wonders awaited with the coming dawn. Behind them, the aurora continued its slow fade back into the cosmic darkness, but its gift of beauty and mystery would travel with them forever. And still Stjernadance sailed on, faithful and true, through the magical hours when earth and sky became one. And a lonely Viking found himself cradled in the infinite embrace of the peaceful northern sea. In the gentle motion of the waves and the soft whisper of wind in the rigging, Olaf heard the ancient song of his people, a melody of courage and wonder, of journeys into the unknown and the eternal search for something greater than themselves. But this journey was different from those of his warrior ancestors. This was a voyage of the spirit. As sleep finally began to claim him, rocked by the eternal rhythm of the sea and blessed by the memory of dancing lights, Olaf smiled to himself. Tomorrow would bring new wonders, new moments of peace and beauty. But for now, it was enough to drift through the star-kissed waters, cradled by the sea and crowned by the infinite sky, a Viking at peace with the world and with himself. Chapter 4. The Gentle Return. Dawn came slowly to the northern waters, creeping across the sky like a shy child afraid to disturb the sleeping world. Olaf awoke naturally from his peaceful slumber, his body rocking gently with the eternal rhythm of Stjärna dance as she continued her patient journey through the mirror-calm sea. The old Viking felt more rested than he had in years, his dreams filled with dancing lights and the whispered songs of whales. His sky was painted in the softest shades of pearl and rose, with wisps of cloud drifting across the heavens like silk scarves caught in a gentle breeze. The aurora of the night before had faded into memory, but its magic still lingered in the air, transforming the ordinary morning into something touched by wonder. The water stretched endlessly in all directions, so still and perfect that it seemed like sailing across a vast mirror made of liquid crystal. As Olaf stretched and fully awakened, he became aware of a profound change within himself. The restless energy that had driven him from his comfortable village home had been replaced by a deep, abiding peace. The northern lights had given him their gift, not just the spectacular beauty of their dance, but a sense of connection to something infinitely larger and more mysterious than his everyday concerns. He stood carefully in the gently swaying boat and looked around at his watery kingdom. The horizon curved away in all directions, still showing no sign of land. But now, instead of feeling isolated, Olaf felt embraced by the vastness. The sea had become his home, the sky his roof, and the endless expanse of water and light his garden of contemplation. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying hints of ice from the far northern reaches where summer never fully arrived. Olaf breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the pure essence of the Arctic Sea. Each breath seemed to wash away more of the accumulated tensions and worries of his land-bound life, leaving him feeling lighter and more alive with each passing moment. A pod of dolphins appeared off the port side, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with effortless grace. They seemed curious about the solitary sailor and his small boat, swimming alongside stjernedans for several minutes before beginning to play. They leaped and dove in perfect synchronization, their joy in simply being alive so pure and infectious that Olaf found himself laughing aloud for the first time in months. The dolphins' visit felt like another blessing, another sign that he was welcome in this vast wilderness of water and sky. As they finally disappeared beneath the surface with barely a ripple to mark their passing, Olaf felt grateful for the encounter. The sea creatures seemed to understand something that land dwellers often forgot, that life was meant to be lived with joy and wonder, not constant worry and striving. As the sun climbed higher, painting the water in shades of gold and turquoise, Olaf began to think about his eventual return home. The thought no longer filled him with dread or reluctance. He had found what he came seeking, though it had been more profound and life-changing than he had ever imagined. The northern lights had shown him that there was still magic in the world, still beauty and mystery beyond human understanding. But more than that, the journey itself had been a healing. Each day and night on the peaceful waters had stripped away layers of accumulated stress and sorrow, revealing the calm, contented man he had always been beneath the worries of daily life. The gentle rocking of the boat, the whisper of wind in the rigging, the endless dance of light on water. These simple pleasures had reminded him of what truly mattered. The wind picked up slightly from the south, perfect for beginning the long journey home. Olaf raised the sail with practiced movements, feeling the familiar thrill as the fabric caught the breeze and stjernedans began to move with renewed purpose through the water. But there was no urgency now, no need to hurry. He had learned the secret of sailing with time instead of against it, moving in harmony with the natural rhythms of wind and wave. As the boat settled into her comfortable cruising pace, Olaf took out his simple provisions and ate a peaceful breakfast. The dried fish tasted sweeter somehow, seasoned by salt air and contentment. The fresh water was cool and pure, each sip a reminder of the springs and streams of his distant homeland. But even thoughts of home brought no anxiety now, only a gentle anticipation of sharing his newfound peace with friends and neighbours who might have forgotten how to truly. The morning passed in perfect tranquility. Seabirds appeared occasionally, riding the air currents with effortless grace. Schools of fish moved beneath the surface like living clouds, their silver bodies flashing in the filtered sunlight. The sea had revealed itself to be not empty, but full of life and wonder for those who took the time to truly see. Olaf found himself humming ancient sailing songs, melodies that had been passed down through generations of seafaring Vikings. But where once these songs had been filled with urgency and conquest, now they seemed to speak of gentler themes, of homecoming and gratitude, of the simple joy of being alive on the beautiful sea. His voice blended with the sounds of wind and water, creating a harmony as old as the first boat that ever left shore. As the sun reached its zenith, Olaf began to see subtle changes in the water and sky that told him he was slowly, gradually making his way back toward more familiar waters. The colour of the sea was shifting from the deep purple blue of the Arctic to the softer blues and greens of the waters closer to home. Clouds began to appear more frequently, building into the towering cumulus formations that spoke of land somewhere beyond the horizon. But these signs of approaching civilization brought no sadness or regret. Olaf had learned something precious during his time alone on the vast sea. That peace was not a place you travelled to, but a state of being you carried within yourself. The tranquility he had found out here among the stars and dancing lights would travel home with him, a permanent gift from the sea to treasure for the rest of his days. The afternoon brought a steady, comfortable wind that pushed Stjörnadans steadily southward. The boat seemed eager now to complete her mission, carrying her master safely home with his cargo of wonder and wisdom. Her hull cut through the small waves with a musical hiss, and her rigging sang softly in the breeze like a contented sigh. Olaf settled into his favourite spot at the stern and let himself sink into the meditative trance that had become as natural as breathing during his time at sea. The tiller responded to his slightest touch, the boat and sailor moving together as one entity, perfectly attuned to the subtle messages of wind and current. Time seemed to flow like honey, each moment complete in itself, requiring nothing more than simple presence and awareness. As evening approached, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Olaf caught his first glimpse of land in days, a thin line of darkness on the southern horizon that gradually resolved itself into the mountains and fjords of his homeland. The sight filled him not with relief, but with quiet satisfaction. He had sailed into the unknown and found exactly what his soul needed. And now he was returning home, transformed. The wind held steady through the night, and by dawn of the following day, Stjörnadans was sailing through the outer reaches of familiar waters. Olaf recognized the shape of distant islands, the pattern of currents, the particular quality of light that belonged to his home waters. But everything looked different now, seen through eyes that had been cleansed by solitude and wonder. Other boats began to appear, fishing vessels heading out for their daily work, trading ships following the ancient routes between settlements. The sailors who saw the solitary figure in his small boat waved in greeting, recognizing a fellow seaman even from a distance. Olaf waved back, feeling a warm connection with these men who shared his love of the sea, but also grateful for the peaceful solitude that had been his companion for so many days. Stjernadans entered the mouth of the fjord that led to his village. Olaf felt a deep sense of completion. The familiar shores rose on either side, covered with pine forests that filled the air with their sweet, resinous scent. Birds called from the trees, and he could see smoke rising from chimneys in the distance, signs of the warm, welcoming community that awaited his return. But he was in no hurry now. The journey had taught him the value of savoring each moment, of moving through life with the same gentle rhythm that had carried him across the peaceful sea. He lowered the sail and took up the oars, rowing slowly and steadily toward home as the morning light painted the fjord walls in shades of gold and green. Children playing on the shore were the first to spot him, their excited voices carrying across the water as they ran to tell their parents that Olaf Gentleheart had returned from his mysterious journey. Soon, a small crowd had gathered at the dock, curious to hear stories of where he had been and what he had seen. But as Stjernadans glided the final few yards to the wooden pier, Olaf felt no need to rush into explanations or dramatic tales. The true story of his journey could not be told in words. It lived now in the peaceful rhythm of his breathing, in the way his shoulders no longer carried the weight of constant worry, in the quiet contentment that had settled in his heart like a blessing. He tied up his boat with the same careful attention he had always given such tasks. But now each movement was infused with gratitude and presence. Stjernadans had carried him safely across hundreds of miles of open ocean and back again, had been his companion and shelter and trusted friend. She deserved the same reverence he would show to any member of his family. "Welcome home, Olaf," called his neighbour Magnus, a burly fisherman with kind eyes. "We were beginning to worry about you. How was your journey to see the northern lights?" Olaf smiled as he stepped onto the solid planks of the dock, feeling the strange sensation of land that didn't move beneath his feet. "The lights were beautiful, Magnus," he said simply. "More beautiful than I had ever imagined." But the real gift was the journey itself, the peace of being alone with the sea and the stars. The crowd gathered closer, eager for more details, more dramatic stories of storms weathered and dangers overcome. But Olaf just smiled and gently deflected their questions. Some experiences, he had learned, were too precious and too personal to be shared in casual conversation. The aurora would dance again for others who made the journey with open hearts. The sea would offer her gifts of peace and wisdom to anyone who approached her with respect and patience. As the crowd gradually dispersed, going about their daily business, Olaf walked slowly up the familiar path toward his cottage. Everything looked the same: the stone walls, the thatched roof, the small garden where his vegetables grew in neat rows. But he felt like a different person walking through this unchanged landscape, carrying within himself a treasure more valuable than gold or silver. That evening, as he sat by his fire and watched the flames dance in the hearth, Olaf felt the gentle rocking motion of the sea, still moving in his memory. The cottage was warm and comfortable, but part of him would always remain out there, on the peaceful waters, sailing eternally under the star-filled sky toward the dancing lights of the aurora. He had gone seeking the northern lights and had found them in all their magnificent glory. But he had also found something even more precious, the knowledge that peace was not something to be pursued or captured, that something that already existed within him, waiting to be discovered in the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the gentle rhythm of breath and heartbeat, in the simple miracle of being alive in a world full of wonder. As sleep began to claim him in his own bed for the first time in many days, Olaf smiled to himself. Tomorrow would bring the familiar routines of village life, the small tasks and daily concerns that filled ordinary days. But he would meet them all with the same peaceful presence he had learned from the sea, moving through life with the steady grace of Stjernedans, sailing through calm waters. The northern lights would dance again in the Arctic sky, weaving their magic across the darkness for other seekers who had the courage to sail into the unknown. The sea would continue her eternal conversation with the shore, whispering secrets of peace and patience to those who took the time to listen. And somewhere in his heart, Olaf would always be sailing those star-kissed waters, forever young, forever free, forever at peace with the infinite mystery of the beautiful world. The gentle voyage was complete, but its gifts would last a lifetime. And in his dreams that night, as every night thereafter, Olaf Gentleheart sailed on through peaceful seas toward dancing lights, cradled by the eternal rhythm of waves, and blessed by the infinite embrace of the star-filled sky. The story of the peaceful Viking and his journey to the northern lights was ended, but its spirit would live on in the gentle rocking of memory, in the whispered promise that peace awaits all those brave enough to sail into the vast unknown of their own hearts, seeking not conquest or treasure, but the simple, profound gift of being truly alive. And so, like the soft lapping of waves against a quiet shore, like the gentle breathing of a sleeper at rest, like the eternal dance of stars across the peaceful night sky, this tale draws to its gentle close, leaving only the sweet drowsiness that comes after a long journey home, and the blessed promise of peaceful dreams ahead.